I'm Erin O'Byrne and welcome to Everything EFL podcast. I'm passionate about serving teachers and I offer training for schools and institutions whose language teachers need a little refresher, a change of mindset and some super practical ideas to put into their classrooms straight away. There is no one-size-fits-all lesson plan, but you've got a friend and support system in me. I can help reduce your overwhelm, give you some teacher inspiration, and improve your work-life balance. How? With some solid advice, takeaways you can try out immediately, and some much-needed teacher love, because your well-being is important too. Are you ready to make small changes one step at a time and remember how amazing you are? Let's go! Hello, you gorgeous teacher. If you're one of my lovely regular listeners, welcome back. If you're brand new to Everything EFL podcast, you are most welcome and I hope you stick around. Now, I'm always talking about the lexical approach. Have you ever wondered how it works in real life? Today, I'm going to share with you a lesson plan that took me probably about 4 or 5 minutes to create and just the general details of it. Now, as you know, I'm not a big one for planning. I understand when you have to go in depth, certain things require more prep. But what I'm talking about now, is my first day back after 2 weeks. I have 2 classes, B1 and B2, for context, 90 minutes each. I have a great relationship with them and, just see if there's anything that needs reviewing. Now, I hadn't received any information about one of the classes, which at first I was like, what am I going to do? And then I took a deep breath and went, okay, so this is what I did. Let's start with my B1 class. It was Monday. I elicited what did you get up to at the weekend? And then I wrote it on the board, what did you get up to at the weekend? In folk phonetics, which if you don't know is it could be a mixture between the International Phonemic Alphabet and kind of normal letters, or maybe no symbols from the International Phonemic Alphabet and just normal letters. Now, the only thing from the IPA that I use is the schwa because my students are familiar with it. So if you can imagine what did you get up to at the weekend written with the sounds that are actually used rather than the ones that are written. That's what I mean. I noted down a couple of pieces of emergent language and then I asked everyone to tell me one thing they did at the weekend. And, these are the little phrases that they use again and again, but I always find there's just a little mistake in there, like a little preposition missing or something like that, or they say it just a little bit unnaturally. So, this is exactly the reason I asked them, right? So I put these common chunks and phrases on the board and then I'll give you an example. So I went to Cliff of Hoath, right, instead of the Cliffs of Hoath, or I went to the Herbert Park instead of Herbert Park, and I went to the Tesco, which is a supermarket for my international listeners. So actually, it was really interesting that the use or non-use of articles actually came up quite a lot, and I wasn't expecting that, but this is the beauty of eliciting and using the language your students give you. You can identify an issue. Okay, so this is a problem for everybody. All right, let's have a closer look at this, and then you can come back to that in later classes. And then someone else said, I stayed at home and I didn't do anything. And I went, do you remember the phrase we learned a few weeks ago? And it was lounged around. Now, nobody remembered it immediately, of course. That repetition hasn't been there for them to really commit it to their long-term memory. So what I did was I wrote the first letter, L, and then A, lounged around. And then I added another letter to each word until one of them went, lounged around. They remembered. I took a photo of the board and I'll figure out what to do with that language for future review. I think I'm probably going to start by creating little vocabulary and question cards. But obviously we need to do other things to contextualize the language a little bit more. But I'll worry about that later. Back to the lesson. So what I did next was, because probably almost everybody in the class had made a little mistake and they were on the board, I got them to switch partners. Actually, they were in groups of about 3. We got them standing up just to move around a little bit, and they asked the same question, what did you get up to at the weekend? And they repeated their answers, so there's just that little bit of repetition there. Now, this took a good half an hour, and I know that some of you are pressed for time. This is something you could maybe condense and do over the course of 2 or 3 lessons, okay? So always remember, guys, and I'm always saying this, if you like an idea but it's not quite suitable, steal and adapt. Use your creativity and the knowledge of your class and the length of it and the space you have to adapt it so you can use it in some way with your students. So I had a quick look at the course book on Friday afternoon, and the topic was art. I thought, okay, I don't really want to get into that today. I don't like getting into the book on Mondays, really. But there's a British artist called Steve Cutts, and I played a video called Mobile World. I highly recommend you use it in some capacity in your classes. I'll put a link in the show notes. So it's a very gloomy depiction of the way we use mobile phones, and there is a lot of truth in there. So the first thing I got them to do was to write a summary in 2 sentences of what the video is about. Now, if you guys want to use this, I just want to say that I played it in slightly slow motion because there's so much to see. And then I asked them to watch it a couple of times silently again, and they had to write down 3 points in the video or scenes or images that really resonated with them. Now, we ran out of time and we're going to continue that today. We're going to discuss those 3 things with their groups, and what I'm also probably going to do is get them to create some discussion questions around that topic. And we can do that another day, possibly on a Friday. So just keeping up the theme, maybe using some of the language that I hear them discussing and putting it into a question form. And it flowed really easily. The 90 minutes went really, really quickly with barely any input from me and loads of output from my students. Now, with the B2s, I did the same. What did you get up to at the weekend? And I noted down some emergent language. Obviously, there wasn't as much because they're much stronger. But one thing that did come up was, people do a lot of household chores at the weekend. And one of them actually said house chores. I was like, okay, that's a nice little piece of emergent language we can discuss. And then people said I wash my clothes or do the laundry, clean my room, things like that. But I pointed out that we often actually use do the ing, so do the cooking, do the cleaning, do the ironing, do the dishes, do the drying up, right? Do the dishes. I know that's not an ing, that's a noun, but you get my drift. And I think what I'm going to do tomorrow is a little warmer activity where they have to pretend they're living together and they have to negotiate like a sort of a cleaning schedule. And, think about the things you hate doing, think about the things you don't mind doing, and try and negotiate your schedule with your partner. And I'm going to write on the board, I'll do the blah, blah, blah if you do the blah, 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 because I think it's a nice phrase. And I think that if we are in any kind of situation where we have to negotiate or make decisions quickly, where people have tasks, this is a really nice phrase to use. And also the context isn't far off from the real world. They all live with people and they all have to do their weekly or daily tasks. And then I thought to myself on the Friday, I was like, what can I do that doesn't take any prep? I know what I haven't done in a long time. BBC 1 Minute World News. Now, if you haven't used this, I would only recommend it for B2 and above. It's basically usually 4 short summaries of news stories around the world. Now, this one was actually only 29 seconds long. So what I thought was, okay, I'll do a bit of decoding. Now, I have to admit, I didn't watch the BBC World News clip until we got into the lesson, so I couldn't really prepare anything beforehand, which if you're doing decoding, I think you probably should do, but we've kind of done a little bit of this before, and I think, let's just see how it goes. So, if you're interested in decoding, look back a couple of episodes, possibly 149, I can't think right now, but there's kind of an introduction to what decoding is. Go back and listen to that. So we watched the stories and they noted down very sort of briefly what the stories were. And then I kind of identified a few phrases, I scribbled them down, and they were phrases with like weak forms, like the schwa sound. So what I did really quickly while they were watching it a couple of times to write down notes was I wrote down a few sentences on the board with some gaps. Things like, I always run to the pub from work, and the gap was run to the pub from. The second one was, it's the best way from here to the school, and I blanked out from here to, let's see, the ups and downs of life. So ups and downs was missing. And the last one was, I wanted to tell you a bit about myself. So the missing part was to tell you a bit, I think. So all of those little bits that I blanked out have the sound in them, that schwa sound. So I told them what we were doing and why we were doing it, because there were a few new students there. The existing students that I have love this kind of thing. So they were like, okay, great. So there was great motivation in the class. So what we did was they copied down those sentences with the blanks. I dictated them. And do you know what? I dictated them into my phone. And then I just played them over and over, maybe 3 or 4 times, because just to save your voice, because you know yourself, your voice can get a little bit sore if you're talking a lot. And then we looked at the answers. I took everybody's answers of what they heard on the board, and it's important that they don't sort of share and help at this point. You're taking down all the answers so we can say, oh, okay, so that's interesting. That's, you didn't catch that, or you thought it was that. And what that does is that shows the students that the things that they don't actually hear in a stream of speech that cause the problems are these very kind of beginner elementary function words that we use all the time. So going back to those sentences from the actual news report that I scribbled down, I put those on the board with gaps. So, for example, the sentences were something like, a trial beginning on the 8th of May. So I blanked out a trial because and then the 8th of May, that was blanked out. millions of voters accused of tying up and robbing, accused of was blanked out, and then up and robbing was blanked out. So again, all the blanks have those schwa sounds. So I wrote them on the board with the gaps, they copied them, they listened a couple of times, and then we repeated that procedure of, what did you hear? Let's have a look. And it was interesting because, like, for example, the trial of 10 men, one of them actually heard describe instead of the trial. And the 8th of May, I think somebody heard of the 8th of May instead of on the 8th of May. Yeah, and then it just draws students' attentions to those things, and it's like quite intense, but it's quite short. You don't spend longer than, say, 10, 15 minutes on this kind of thing, but it really just focuses them in on those little words that are very soft when you speak, and it just really zeroes in on them, okay? Now, this, like I said, took almost no planning, and it's all about reacting in the moment. And I'm not saying it's really, really easy if you're fairly new to teaching, and it might sound quite daunting. I get that. But there comes a time when you just have to let go. And you have to react in the moment, and I'm telling you, it pays off. One of the participants of my Heart and Craft course, now she was probably the most inexperienced teacher, and I definitely think she lacked a little bit of self-belief and confidence. But in our WhatsApp group, she's been the biggest contributor, and even this week, she has taken some chances, she's taken some risks, and she's done some things she's never done before that were a little bit more reactive, more spontaneous. And she's kind of her thinking has flipped to what can I give the students to what can the students give me, and that will really cut down her planning time, and I'm so proud of her. And it's just amazing the transformation that can happen when you are guided in the right direction. Now, if you're interested in this, if you're interested in cutting down your prep time, working smarter, not harder, and also learning about the lexical approach and how this can help you plan less, consider signing up to the waiting list for my no-nonsense lexical toolkit course. The doors open in a couple of weeks. It's a 4-week course. You'll learn all about the lexical approach and how it can cut down your prep time and give your students more real-world examples of language. And this is what will drive them forward and just engage and motivate them more. The waiting list will also entitle you to a big discount, and I don't think this will be a price that you'll see again. So I urge you to think about it, join the wait list. There's no obligation to buy, and the course starts on the 10th of June. Until then, my darling, gorgeous teacher, if you enjoyed this episode, if you get something out of listening to me, give this podcast a 5-star rating or comment, or even give me a review. This helps push me up the ratings and makes me more visible in a sea of podcasts. The waiting list link is in the show notes. The Mobile World video by Steve Cutts is in the show notes. The link to my Breathe Easy Teacher newsletter is in the show notes. This gives you weekly advice and tips as well. Follow me on social media. Look at my stories on Instagram as well if you don't, because generally every day I post some terrible board work and I show you what I'm doing, and it might just inspire you to try new things as well. So until then, look after yourself, have a safe and peaceful week, and share the love. Bye.